Thank you for being here. As you've already heard, we're at Annette and Graham Henry, and we're both qualified as breathing instructors. It's another of those areas of life that's fascinating to me, because it seems that however important it is, and it's hugely important, we breathe every moment of every day, and yet the conventional medicine doesn't really do very much with it, other than assess people as a route to finding out how ill they are. And of course, they treat people for asthma, but don't necessarily focus on breathing correctly along with the treatment. And also, when people have operations for nasal obstructions or whatever, they're frequently not instructed how to breathe afterwards. And so the problem actually persists very often. So we think this is hugely important. We're passionate about it. And in particular, it was me that started it off, because on a recommendation, I read this, which may be familiar to some people, a couple of years ago. And I was fascinated, by the way. It's a very interesting read. He's a journalist, and he doesn't shy away from trying everything. So it was an amazingly interesting read for somebody who thought it might just be vaguely interesting. It turns out it instructed me that I had dysfunctional breathing, which I had no idea about. I'd had all this focus on natural health for quite a long time. I'd been meditating for a good decade or so, and breathing really quite well while I was meditating. I had no idea that the rest of the time, when I wasn't doing that, I wasn't breathing very well at all. I was getting a lot of it wrong, to my detriment. And I didn't know what the downsides were of what I was doing. I simply knew that I had to do something about it to see if I could improve my health condition, which at the time was breathlessness following COVID. And I wondered if the breathing would help with that. It did. It helped enormously, cleared it up. And it had an additional knock-on effect for me, in that I started to finally sleep after about 30 years of, I have to say, insomnia. I'm a chronic insomniac, and I didn't know that the way I was breathing was making my sleeping worse. So of course it's exciting for me. It became interesting to Graham, who wasn't particularly switched on by it until he was allowed to be one of my case studies. I was allowed to use friends and relatives to practice on. And yeah, it captured your imagination.
Yeah, and to be honest, I could see how deeply ensconced Annette was in the research, and she was so inspired by the book that it did kind of, I began to think there must be something about this breathing. And then when she took the program with Patrick McKeown, it came home to me that this was something that was worth looking at. So I was happy to be a case study. And I applied, I followed the exercises that Annette set to me, and I began to notice a difference. And particularly for me, I noticed it because I don't really have a problem. I didn't have a breathing problem that Annette did post-COVID, but just being an occasional jogger, I noticed that I was getting quite out of breath normally, after a relatively short distance. And I just thought that I'm unfit. It hadn't occurred to me that actually the way I was breathing and changing the way I was breathing could actually make a difference. And it did. And I began to run faster and for longer without feeling tired. And I also adopted running. I managed to run without actually once breathing through my mouth, just breathing through my nose, which at the start was tricky. As I got more used to it, I realized that it was enhancing my performance. So I was completely switched on. So I decided to take a certification as well in something called Oxygen Advantage, and I became a functional breathing instructor. And Annette, at the same time, she'd already studied the ACO breathing course, which, did you want to say a little bit more about that, Annette?
Yeah, that one focuses primarily on health, which was obviously my area of interest. I did become quite fascinated by aspects of the Oxygen Advantage and decided to add that in as well. So we both have that one. But Buteyko is the one that really focuses on health, and that's my, first and foremost, that's my passion with this. Okay,
Yeah.
so properly to get started now, I just want to give you an idea of why it is that breathing can be so relevant to health. And really, there are three main reasons which we'll expand on as we go through. Breathing, whether correctly or incorrectly, will impact on how we sleep, how we experience stress, and whether or not we're properly oxygenated. So, of course, it's important because if you sleep badly and you have high levels of stress, then we know full well that as long as this is chronic, then it can lead to other health issues. And that's the reason it has such a wide impact. In terms of the oxygenation, you need oxygen to get to the cells, to muscles, to the organs such as the brain. So anyone experiencing brain fog or confusion, it may not be exclusively down to breathing, although that is possible. But why let it be worse when something as simple as readdressing breathing can make that big difference? So that's really the reason. There are three big reasons why breathing correctly can make a difference, especially if it's not quite as good as it can be now. You want to
So
do the Bolt score?
we're going to do a simple test that people can do at home if you wish to. I realise some of you are on camera and you may not wish to do it, but it's fairly straightforward. It's called the Bolt test, which is the oxygen level test, and it's just really an indicator of how effective or how efficient, should I say, our breathing is. What degree of breathlessness are we likely to suffer? So what you need to do is to keep your mouth closed. I'll describe it before you do it, so you know exactly what to do. To close your mouth, take a normal breath in through your nose and a normal breath out through your nose. Then pinch your nose. So you're holding your breath on after the out breath through your nose. Pinch your nose. And then when you feel the first definite desire to breathe, then breathe, continue breathing. So we want you to time how long it takes you to get to that first desire to breathe. And it's not a test of how long you can hold your breath. That would be counterproductive and wouldn't give you the result that's required. It's literally just obeying your body's signal that, oh yeah, it's now time to breathe. So you may feel a little the urge to breathe in your diaphragm, or you may feel it in your chest or in your throat. So well, if everyone's ready, if you've got a watch or your mobile phone in front of you, or a clock with a second hand, and just time how long it takes to do it. So I'm going to start it off now. So taking a normal breath through your nose, normal breath out through your nose, pinch your nose, and keep it held until you feel the first definite desire to breathe. And your breathing should be normal when you finish. If it's too raspy, it means you've held it for too long. So I'll just
do the same as when you start.
Yeah, more or less the same as when you started. So I'll just allow that to go for a little while, just to give everyone the chance to do it. And when you've finished, Annette will share with you the results in terms of what it means.
You are welcome to put them in the chat if you want to. I'm always quite surprised people seem to want to do this, and I'm very happy for that, simply because it gives us a spectrum of possible results. So if you feel like putting your result in, you can do. You absolutely don't need to.
Okay, you can see one coming there. Yeah, that's good to see.
And whatever you do, there's no point in comparing yourself with anybody else.
It's a very precise one there.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah. 2 decimal points. That's the first time I've seen that.
Never seen that before. That's impressive. Okay, yeah, good.
Okay, so Annette, do you want to say a little bit about what the kind of different scores would mean?
Yeah, I do. Basically, if your score is 25 or more, and there is one here at the moment, then you are almost certainly in the region of being a functional breather. So your breathing isn't dysfunctional. That's more or less the cutoff point. It seems to be that around 89% of people whose score is 25 or better, they don't have dysfunctional breathing. Below that, then there's a bit more to think about. Now, if your score is particularly low, I would urge you to see it as a positive. I know this doesn't normally happen with a low score, But it may mean that if you can address your breathing, then some wonderful things might happen for you, which is great, because life might not be quite as you'd want it to be in terms of your health, and there's a good chance it could get better. So if you're say between 10 and 20, then you probably find that you do have a few breathing issues. You may get a little bit breathless. But and yes, it varies. Yes, I've just seen something. It does vary from day to day and time of day as well. If you've got a particularly low one, so single figures, then you certainly do need to improve it, because you need to feel better and you need to be able to cope better. It would mean as well that you would be strongly advised to really take it very easy with the practice that you do. So the practice that we're suggesting today will be really quite gentle, because it's the easiest way to start, because everybody can do it, with one exception, and that is any breathing exercises that we do are not suitable for people in pregnancy and especially in the first trimester. But other than that, it's absolutely fine. If you want to do this test, if you are going to kind of retrain your breathing, the best time of day to do it is first thing in the morning, the very first thing that you do, so that it's always the same. It's after waking up, you've not been running around or you've not been eating. All of these things influence this score. So that's the best time of day to do it. And then you can keep a track on how it's going. But bear in mind as well, it will change. Sometimes things just fluctuate a bit. It's never going to be beautifully linear. And you may find as well, if you redo it, leave it for a minute before you redo it. Like that, that's key as well. The last one will have influenced the one that's coming up if you redo it. As I say, do try to do it at the same time every day, and bear in mind that there are fluctuations, especially if you're female. I haven't got time to go into that today, but female breathing is different, and it does change throughout the month. So just bear that in mind, and it gives you a lot of feedback.
It's also worth mentioning that if you have got a low score, don't worry, it's not a sign of physical fitness necessarily, because a lot of elite athletes, in fact, I think it was something that we heard yesterday, some scientific research that was done, or a study that was done on athletes, and something like 90% of them had what we would class as dysfunctional breathing. So, I mean, they're physically fit, but they're not necessarily breathing optimally. And just to think about that, if you're an athlete and you can improve your breathing, then it may mean the difference between being off the podium and winning the gold medal. So there's real potential for athletes to improve. And our coach, Patrick McKeown, has actually trained elite teams like football teams, etc., to improve their breathing fitness. So it's quite exciting what we can do with our breathing. So why is it then that we're getting our breathing wrong, our everyday breathing wrong? Well, there are a number of reasons. One of the main reasons is simply just our modern lifestyles. Our modern diets, the way we eat affects our breathing, processed foods, etc. Heavily blended foods, which means we're not using our jaws, building our jaw muscles as we used to do. That can have an effect. Overeating, because of course, if we eat a lot, it tends to push against our diaphragm, and therefore we're not as comfortable breathing. It may have become habitual due to being ill, for chronic illness, for example. If you have problems a lot with your sinuses, you tend then to breathe through your mouth rather than through your nose, because your nose is blocked. It may be role models. Maybe parents breathe more through their mouth rather than through their nose, and of course children then maybe develop the habit because they imitate their parents. It may be role models in films even, and sport as well. In fact, there was an interesting thing I just heard yesterday about the Wimbledon champion Alcaraz, is it? Alcaraz, I can never remember his name. He actually is quite a mouth breather, and you wonder how much better he would be even if he trained himself to breathe more through his nose. Posture. I mean, a lot of us, just particularly if we're sitting at the desk at a computer, we tend to slump over, which affects our diaphragm and our ability to breathe properly. Or sitting on a sofa a lot, for example. Stress, which Annette's already mentioned, affects the way we breathe, and to often breathe from the upper chest. excessive talking as well, which anyone who lectures or is speaking regularly, you can't breathe through your nose if you're talking all the time, and that can have an effect. Airtight houses, again, affects our breathing, and also the obvious anatomical challenges. A lot of people have deviated septum, which affects the way they breathe through the nose, or possibly nasal polyps, or just the overall structure of our face may compromise the way that we breathe. So there's a lot of things going on there that can affect our breathing. So, Annette, what does suboptimal breathing look and sound like then?
Yes, you've probably already gleaned from us that we are referring to breathing through the mouth as being not optimal at all. There is nothing to gain from breathing through the mouth, nothing in terms of mouth's useful, but not for breathing. It has nothing to offer, but the nose does, and we will come to that. So breathing through the nose is primary as a primary thing, and we have to say as well, in terms of the adult population, nobody's been able to measure how many people breathe through their mouths, for the simple reason that the overwhelming majority of people who breathe through their mouths don't do it all the time. So it's very hard to gauge that, and it's when it becomes habitual and frequent that it's a problem. Nobody's going to suggest you should absolutely never take a single breath through your mouth. I'm doing it right now as I'm talking. But also fast breathing. This was my downfall, or one of them anyway. Breathing faster than we need to. And it's actually hyperventilating. It's over breathing. And unless it's really demonstrative and looks like a panic attack, I don't think we really notice it. But I was breathing too fast. It's faster than my metabolic needs, faster than my body needed. And that is quite problematic. It also often goes with upper chest breathing, where the breath doesn't get down to the lower lobes of the lungs, which means then as well that oxygenation isn't going to happen as well as it should. So faster breathing, upper chest breathing, mouth breathing, audible breathing. If you or somebody near you can hear your breathing, then it's probably not quite as it should be. So you think about a baby, a healthy baby breathes really, really lightly, and you just don't even hear it. And that's what we should be aiming for as well. We're talking about audible breathing at rest, not obviously not when you're out running or whatever. That's a little bit different. That would be a lot to ask. There's also this very strange thing which I also found I was doing, and it's involuntary breath holds. So for no apparent reason, or there may be a background kind of odd reason, you hold your breath. I don't know if any of you have experienced this. I've often come across a lot of people who have, because I'm not the only one, it seems. And I was doing it because being an insomniac, I was getting up early in the morning and trying to be very quiet and not disturb Graham. Somehow in my mind, holding my breath made me quieter. Of course it didn't. It was a complete fake way of looking at life, really, in terms of trying to be quiet. As if somebody else is doing it. I'm not the only one. I'm always relieved to not be the only one. It seems such an odd thing to do. But that's a sign of dysfunctional breathing as well. And it's such an odd thing we do. And you know what? A lot of people are doing it now when they read their email or they're on the computer, to the point where it's got a name. It's now known as email apnea. People holding their breath while they're checking their email, possibly because it's like, what's going to be in the inbox today? But also just the position, it's not ideal. The kind of leaning over position, I think it encourages a little bit of breath holding. And then the other one is, it can go a little bit with the fast breathing, the over breathing. The more you over breathe, the more you want to breathe, and that can lead to excessive yawning and sighing. But that may be another sign as well. And it's great news if you've got these, because you can reverse them all, and then you start to feel better. So I am optimistic about this. So please don't feel put out if these apply to you. So in terms of the faster breathing I've mentioned, that one, if it's really fast, you know what it looks like. It looks like anxiety. And that's what Graham's going to tell you about.
Yeah, if I'd known what I know now about breathing 30 years ago, when I had a really high pressure new job, I was based out in the Netherlands. I had to open up an office. I was the only person for the company out there. The rest of the head office was in the UK. Lots of pressure, and it affected me. I got quite anxious. This was, a little bit too much for me. And I was also at the time quite overweight. I was probably about 30 to 40 kilos heavier than I am now. And that was probably also having an effect on pressing my diaphragm. But I realized that I was always feeling slightly out of breath. I think the stress was making my diaphragm muscles and my chest muscles tense. So I wasn't breathing freely. It made me feel all the time, I just can't take that satisfying breath that you feel. You just want to deepen your, take breath into your lungs and just get that nice feeling of taking a deep breath. And I was forcing the breath into my lungs, trying to get that breath. And I realized that all the time I was just chronically over breathing. So it was a kind of hyperventilation, but on a lower level than we think about hyperventilation normally. It was affecting my my head. I was feeling panicky, anxious, dizzy sometimes got ringing in my ears. I went to the doctor about it, and he just wanted to give me tablets for depression, which was completely not the case for me. So I thought I've got to do something about this, but I didn't really know what to do about it. And it came to a head once when I was actually I was meeting somebody for a date not Annette, right? I was going to a classical music concert in Amsterdam, and I was meeting her there, and I'd had a really busy day. I was rushing around. I was trying to get everything finished. I didn't have time to eat, and so I was already in a state of kind of agitation. And anyway, I got to the concert hall, and we'd been assigned seats, and to my horror, they assigned us to the middle of an aisle, not the middle of an aisle, the middle of a row. If the aisle was far too far away from my comfort level, but I ended up sitting in the middle of this row with people either side of me. Felt really claustrophobic, and then the sound hushed, and the concert started. The really, really quiet, slow movement, and I just felt everybody must be able to hear my breathing, because I got really panicky. I got to the point where I felt literally that my heart was beating so loudly and so hard, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Or I was almost wishing myself to pass out, thinking, I can't deal with this, I can't run out. And then something must have kicked in. It must be some kind of self-preservation thing. But I then started to slow my breathing, and I probably breathed through my nose. I can't remember at the time. And I remember it just beginning to subside. And I thought, that's better, that's better. I felt much more comfortable. And it worked. But I didn't take that knowledge away with me. It just happened then. So if I'd realized, I would have helped myself a lot more over the years. I don't tend to suffer that now, and I think the breathing certainly helps. But I realized what I was doing. I was breathing quickly, shallow chest from the upper chest, and I was breathing off far too much carbon dioxide. And as some of you may know, when that happens, the paper bag thing comes in, where you breathe the carbon dioxide back in that you've exhaled to bring things back into the balance. And that is a really important point to realize, that carbon dioxide is not just a waste gas. It's something that actually helps to oxygenate our body better. It might sound counterintuitive, but it does allow oxygen to reach our extremities, our cells, our organs, rather than just stick in our blood with our hemoglobin, down to our hemoglobin. So that comes with slow breathing and light breathing, which we will come on to. So for me, anxiety was a big thing, and we now know that we can help anxiety through using the breath.
Yeah, and that's brought me on to the issue of mask wearing, which some people may have been a bit like a paper bag and an unwanted one stuck in front of their faces. And certainly we had a request or a question rather from somebody last week about whether or not mask wearing has worsened symptoms for people of asthma in her case. And we don't know the answer to that. But what we do know is that we were all given a mandate to wear a mask, and no indication whatsoever of how best to breathe whilst wearing one. And if you have something in front of your face and you're already breathing quite quickly and possibly through an open mouth, and having that in front of your face, it's very, very likely that it's going to increase your experience of anxiety, because you already have a low tolerance to this buildup of carbon dioxide, and that's what's going on here. In fact, that if your BOLT score is under 25 that you did earlier, then there's a good chance that your tolerance to carbon dioxide can improve and that you can bring it back to where it should be. I forgot to mention, by the way, that don't stop at 25, go to 40 ultimately, because that's the best. That's where you would ideally want to be. But back to the issue of actually breathing within a mask, you're going to cope better if you can breathe exclusively through your nose, and that's not even physically possible for everybody, but if you can do it, and to breathe really light and soft. So this is really what I want to have a go at showing you right now, so that you can have a go at this. I hope that you're not standing, we're standing, because there is a small chance it might make you a little bit drowsy. But if it does, that's great, because it gives you an indication of how you can calm things down for yourself as well. So if you want to give it a go, it's totally easy. Nobody will notice. It's the sort of thing you can practice absolutely anywhere. I'm assuming that we're all breathing a little bit like this at the moment. We're breathing in, we're breathing out, we're breathing in, we're breathing out. I'm going to ask you to reduce it all so that you're breathing in much less and more slowly, and then you're breathing out also slowly, either as slowly as you're breathing in, or if you want to really extend the relaxation effect, breathe out a little bit more slowly. If you breathe out more slowly on the exhale, you'll find that you are initiating a response from your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the half of the autonomic nervous system that's responsible for the rest and digest. So that will help you to relax. So it's a slow breath in and a very soft, relaxed, and gentle breath out. If you're keen not to get drowsy, then you can keep them at the same level, the in-breath, same as the out-breath. So you give you some balance, but still try and reduce that breathing. Now, the effect that you should be experiencing as you reduce what you're taking in is a kind of air hunger. So ideally, you would like to take in more breath, more air. It's tolerable. If it gets to the point where it's intolerable and you've maybe pushed it a little bit too far, I can see some people at the moment, and I'll just say, I'm not pointing obviously anyone out whatsoever. I know you're getting it right because there's a look, and I know you're doing it. So that's absolutely superb. It's a slow breath in, a soft, relaxed, and gentle breath out. Now, not only is this a good intervention for helping you to be calm and a great exercise before you go to bed for 15, 20 minutes or so before you go to sleep, to give you a better night's rest and to get you to sleep more quickly. Not only that, but if you practice it regularly, then you are actually going to adjust that tolerance to carbon dioxide, and you will find, hopefully, that your BOLT score will increase. As I said, it may have little fluctuations in it, but the overall trend will be that it will increase. And that's really reassuring. Ideally, if you can do this as a practice over about 60 minutes in a day, so 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, whatever, so broken up at different times during the day, you will be retraining the respiratory center in your brain. So you're taking a very soft, relaxed, and gentle breath in. In fact, if you can reduce it a little bit more now, maybe try that. You've already gone far enough with it. Don't take it any further. It's got to fit you. So it's a soft, relaxed, and gentle breath in, a very slow, relaxed, and gentle breath out. And you're taking in less air all the time. It's slower than you were breathing before. It's lighter breathing. It's all through the nose. And whilst I'm on the subject of the nose, let me tell you why it's such a wonderful thing to do. Breathing through your nose, as opposed to your mouth, enables you to increase your carbon dioxide for one thing, and also it enables you to take in something that builds up in the paranasal sinuses, which is nitric oxide. This was only actually discovered in about the early 1990s. It's been there forever, we've always had it. It was only recently discovered. And this nasal nitric oxide, when you inhale, that also helps to dilate airways. It's better still. It's antimicrobial, so it's your first line of defense. It can actually help you to fight viruses and bacterial infections coming in your airway. That's something I think we could have all done with knowing at the start of the pandemic. It's so potent that nitric oxide was actually used clinically to help people with COVID. I don't think it got as much news as other interventions, shall we say, and it also got pushed to one side once the big saviour came. So
it's also a really interesting point to add to that, that you can actually increase the amount of nasal nitric oxide you produce by up to around 15 times by humming on the exhale. So I think that's how most of us hum anyway.
Yes.
And another way to do it is practice playing the didgeridoo, because apparently that vibration also causes more nasal nitric oxide to be produced.
If you have one.
But why on earth have we not told this? I mean, what a great way to protect ourselves from viruses generally, particularly in the winter, breathing through our nose. And if we're on a packed bus or a tram or a train or whatever, a tube in London, people, are full of cold, etc., then it makes sense. Just breathe through your nose gently. You're taking less air in, so you're going to be taking less or fewer viral particles in, and you're also reducing this nasal nitric oxide. It's got to be worth doing. Just to answer a question I saw coming in there, and I know there's quite a few questions, and so that
this one fits
it's
this.
not sporadic and have to go backwards and forwards. We can't answer them all, but no, we're not saying shallow breathing. What it was light breathing. It's actually deep breathing, and
it may not be. If anybody who's struggling with their breathing at the moment, they may not be able to take on board light breathing and deep breathing. I would say don't worry about it. Get the light breathing first, because it's the most difficult and it's the one that's not got very much attention from other areas. The deep breathing, you probably, if you do yoga, for example, then you've done that and you are able to do it, and it's highly relevant. There are 3 pillars to breathing, and it's the biochemistry, which is what you're working on right now if you're doing the light breathing, biomechanical, which involves the diaphragm, and there's the cadence, the speed of breathing. But the problem with focusing first on the other 2 is that because they don't inevitably involve the reduced breathing, it's still possible to hyperventilate while you're doing that, and that's a key factor. So that's why to focus on this one, get this right first, and then you can bring the other pillars in. If you can do them all together right away, do it. Why not? But don't worry about it. First things first, so that you get the first one done.
it's also worth adding that when you breathe through your nose, you automatically engage your diaphragm more, because there is more resistance to breathing through the nose than the mouth, and it activates the muscles more. So that's another benefit.
That is the case for most people. I will have to say, I was one of the people who managed not to engage my diaphragm whilst breathing through my nose. The one thing I was getting right was I was breathing through my nose, and I'm getting everything else wrong. So there are exceptions, and then I was not. Anyway, I think having done a bit of practice, it's worth knowing why. There are other reasons why this is so useful. I've referred to sleep. There's another aspect to sleep that Graham is a specialist in after all these years.
It's the elephant in the room, and I don't mean literally necessarily being unkind to myself, but snoring. So when you've got a wife who's a chronic insomniac and you're a serial snorer, it's not a match made in heaven. Fortunately, we've managed to overcome it, and particularly since we started retraining our own breathing. But there are things that we can do to reduce it or address it. So there are 2 types of snoring. Snoring through the mouth. I don't know why I'm pointing to my chest. Snoring through the mouth and snoring through the nose. Snoring through the mouth is relatively easy to address because it means just keeping the mouth closed at night. But that's more difficult than you might imagine sometimes, because if that's habitual, then how do we do that? We have to look at the reasons for snoring as well. Snoring is really turbulence through a narrow collapsible airway. If you imagine a pipe with a lot of fluid going through it at high force, it's going to maybe make a humming sound because it basically causes a vibration. And it's the same with our airways. So that if our customary breathing is forceful and quicker than it should be, the chances are we're going to actually produce turbulence in our airway. So if we can retrain our breathing during the day in the way that Annette's just described, over time, it will change the respiratory center in our brain to almost like resetting a thermostat to take our breathing down to a lower level. And that itself can help to address the snoring. But it's not foolproof because it depends to what degree you snore. So the snoring through the mouth sounds something like this. And the snoring through the nose sounds something like this. So I probably am more guilty of the latter, although I think I have demonstrated both types to Annette quite regularly. So how did I address it? Well, it's a controversial technique, and it's already been alluded to. I saw a question in the chat. Should we tape our mouths? Controversial because a lot of people think, well, that's dangerous, that's crazy to tape my mouth. And I think for some people that can be the case. Certainly for children, you would not want to tape a child's mouth. But I've got to confess, I've done it for the last year every night, and I feel odd if I don't do it. And it encourages me, obviously, to keep my mouth closed. I just use a little bit of kind of surgical sticky tape, which I have to be careful because sometimes it tends to pull at my lip. So I tend to take the adhesive off it by sticking it a few times onto my arm before I put it on. But there is another way that we can do it, and that's to use something which has actually been produced by Patrick McCowan himself, called myotape, which
for children,
we don't earn anything from this, so we're not plugging his product to make money, but it's something that I wanted to demonstrate. And it's basically it's a piece of tape made from cotton that you just apply over your mouth. You stretch it about 30% more than its normal size, and you literally put it round your mouth so your mouth is still open.
Or able to open.
Or able to open. It's not sticking very well on me because I'm probably sweating a little bit here. Anyway, just to demonstrate that, it applies it's an elasticated strip, and it applies a tensile pressure, encouraging the lips to remain closed. It's very safe for children, and fairly affordable as well. So that's one thing to do, and it certainly helped with me, and Annette will attest to that. But I also snore through my nose, and that's a little bit more tricky sometimes because that may be down to simply having a very narrow nasal airway. And I know that I do, because when I try to run, I mentioned earlier about running with just breathing through my nose. I can't do it for more than about 200 yards or meters unless I wear a strip, which you may recognize. It's called a breathe right strip. I can get by these in Germany as well. And basically, it's just got adhesive. I put that over the bridge of my nose like that, and it opens up my nostrils.
You try it. Try opening your nostrils a little bit and see if it makes a difference to you. That's more or less the effect it has. It's called the Cottle maneuver doing this, and it does help me to breathe a little bit better, but I don't use the strip. So Graham does. But
it works really well for me at night as well to keep my nose airways more open. You can also there's a nasal dilator, which you actually insert in your nose, and it keeps the nostrils open. I found that personally a little bit uncomfortable. When I applied that for running, I actually breathed it out. It just shot out as I was running. But that's a possibility as well. So I think it's really important to recognize that if none of those work, it may be just that you have an issue with your nose, and the slower breathing, the lighter, slower breathing will help to retrain that breathing. So it may help to eradicate it. But we've certainly found that helped.
Yeah, hugely. A big difference. Yeah. I can assure you. In the case of this particular husband, excellent.
Also want to say, if anyone's interested about the myotape, it's myotape, myotape.com. So there is a website where you can find out it's myotape.com. And the nasal dilators also you can find from the website of Patrick McCowan. And that's, is it Buteco Clinic International?
No, they're on the Oxygen Advantage one.
OxygenAdvantage.com as well. So that's just a little aside because I saw a question.
Yeah.
Someone asked also, is this Buteco? The breathing that Annette's trained for health issues is Buteco breathing.
But I bring the two in together because there's so much there that the person who invented Buteco actually, he died in the early part of this century. So of course he can't examine any more of the science that's coming in, and it is happening. There is more science finally coming in about breathing. He can't bring new things into it. Patrick McEwen is doing. He's kind of almost, well, he's effectively taken over as a bit of a leading figure in Buteco, and he's brought in his own Oxygen Advantage because he realised that it was mainly women who were dealing with health issues, and he wanted something that appealed to men initially. Turned out both have more appeal now, but that's another story anyway. Can I just round off a little bit on, just briefly touch on insomnia, since it's been such an issue for me. There are typically two forms of insomnia: getting to sleep and staying asleep, and I've had the privilege of both of those over a long period of time. And one of the impacts of breathing incorrectly can be the same for both. And certainly in my case, it was this fast breathing. And an agitated mind. The two go together. You can have an agitated mind, which is likely to make you breathe faster because you're feeling a little bit stressed, or you can already be breathing fast and it makes your mind work faster, and that doesn't feel too good. And the messages between your brain and your body are suggesting that there's some kind of issue that you need to attend to, and it keeps you awake. I'm nowadays more likely to waken early. I get to sleep okay, I've worked on that, but the waking early is a problem. And I didn't know until I was doing this that I was actually breathing fast. I didn't know. I thought I was breathing okay until I tried to slow it down and couldn't initially. I can now. I've worked on it. But of course, if I wake up and I'm really breathing quite fast, then my body's getting the message that there's something, well, the brain and the body working together. There's a message there. There's a threat. You need to stay awake. And my body was obliging, and now I'm actually sleeping better on the whole. It's not the whole story. I was just making a bad situation worse. I never expected at age 60 that I could potentially improve my sleep, because after 30 years of not sleeping well, I didn't expect post-menopause, all the rest of it, that I could get better sleep, and I have done. So this is huge for me. I still haven't completely addressed all the other issues that come up as a result of whatever impact on our sleep, and there are so many things that do. But I was making it worse with my breathing, and I don't need to do that because it's so simple to rectify it. So I think we're just going to round up here.
There's a lot more to that as well, which we'd love to talk about, things like cerebrospinal fluid and how we produce that when you're breathing. But that's more. We can't go into that now.
And sleep apnea, of course.
Yeah. The other thing is performance. We talked about performance, and particularly athletic performance, or just reducing breathlessness on exertion, and focus and concentration. All of these can be enhanced massively by the way we breathe, because if we're able to oxygenate our body better, we're going to perform better at sport, we're going to think better, we're going to be more on it, we're going to get into the zone. Some of you may have seen, it went viral on the media a few days ago, the Polish tennis, I think Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek was seen wearing tape over her mouth, and journalists asked her why it was, and she said, "I'm not really sure, but my coach told me to do it." And the coach knows what he's doing, clearly, because if you're wearing a tape over your mouth while you're training, it's going to, obviously, you're going to breathe through your nose. It's going to put a higher load on your breathing muscles, which, if you're doing that in practice, it's building up your resilience and your strength to be able to then perform better when you're actually in a competitive game. Because that's how we strengthen our breathing muscles. We put more of a load on our breathing muscles, almost like running at a high altitude or training at a high altitude. The reason that's so good is the thinner air means that we build our breathing muscles more, and then at normal sea level, we're much more fit. But it also enables her, by delivering more oxygen to her brain, we're breathing through the nose, it enables her to think more clearly, strategize when she's playing a game, and enables her to not be so judgmental if she makes a mistake, because she's calm. So there is a real reason for doing that. How have I found improvements in terms of performance? Well, I mentioned earlier about running. It had improved my running. And I mentioned at the age 60, she didn't feel that she'd be able to improve his insomnia when she'd had it all her life. I didn't think at the age of 60 I'd be able to get the best times in running, but I do now. And I'm not an athlete, I really aren't. I'm a park runner, but to me it means a lot to shave 10 or 20 seconds off my best time, and that's through better breathing. So it's really exciting. It's really great to know that we can change our physiology just through adopting different breathing techniques. And we're so passionate about it, and we hope that you've found that useful. We do run breathing programs, which you can find out more about on our website, and we've given you an initial glimpse of an exercise there. There's a lot more to it, but you can't give all the exercises at once, because you've got to start from basics and improve your breathing. And also, you've got to remain accountable. You've got to have the want to remain motivated to do that. And that's what we work with clients on, to help them to keep on it, to answer questions, to give support, and to introduce new breathing exercises. So I'm able to do that in terms of performance and fitness, and it's able to do that in terms of medical conditions, and also on the performance side of things as well. So I think that's all from us in terms of the presentation. Is there anything else from you, Annette?
No, I think we can take some questions in the next 10 minutes or so.
So we hope you found that useful, and there's a lot to get your head around there, I'm sure, because there's a lot of information there, but we hope that you found that useful.